Hi, this is Elizabeth Lee-Wilke, and I read Where is the Mango Princess by Cathy Crimmins. It is an autobiography about an a traumatic brain injury that her husband receives on a family vacation. They won this vacation from an auction to go up to a Canada lake cabin for a week. And while they were out there on their way back home, they were unloading all their stuff. Um, Alan took the boat and was hauling some stuff from their cabin to their car. And he was with his daughter and a few other family friends, and a boat that was being driven by a teenager T-boned him. And luckily, Kelly only suffered a broken arm, but Alan was hit straight in the head. When the boat hit his head, bleeding began under his skull. And during the transport to the hospital via helicopter, he began to have seizures. Once he arrived at the hospital, Alan was immediately put into a medical induced coma to subdue the seizures because they did not want any more damage to his brain. How the doctor described what the accident did to his brain was like shaken baby syndrome. His brain was just knocked around inside of his head. And most of the brain damage that occurred from this was in the frontal lobe of the brain up here, which is actually medically called diffuse axonal injury with subdermal hematomas. So subdermal hematomas are bruising on the brain. But luckily, there was not enough swelling in the brain for Alan to have surgery or to release any pressure, which is a very good thing. They were in Canada at this time, and it was in Kingston. And while they were there on the fifth day, after they were put into a coma, he opened his eyes and said, huh. It's not a very impressive word in the English language, but that's a huge step for a person with a traumatic brain injury. Once he was weaned off the ventilator, they found out that he could speak. He wasn't coherent in what he was saying at all times. He wasn't putting two and two together to say a book was a book or call Cathy Cathy, but he could speak. And they also discovered once he came to that his right side of his body was physically impaired. He had lost the use of it because of the head injury. The title of the book comes about at day 7 after the injury. He asked his wife Cathy where the Mango Princess is, or where is the Mango Princess. And she tried to ask him who that was, if he was talking about her or their child Kelly, or who it was. And he said it was a person that he had spoke to earlier in the day. And they never discovered what he was truly meaning or what he was thinking. It was just a thought he had in his head because of the injury. He was very unaware of his surroundings. He couldn't tell you that he was in a hospital. He didn't know he was in an accident. And he knew he was married with a child, but he couldn't tell you that Cathy was his wife when he saw her. At 10 days post-injury, he was moved to a hospital in Pennsylvania, where they are from. When they arrived there, his short-term memory was not much more than minutes. He was distracted by the simplest things. He didn't understand his body orientation. He couldn't tell you. He would be leaning to the right, and you would think he'd be sitting up straight. He didn't understand where his body was. While there, he entered a disinhibited phase of traumatic brain injury. This is specifically what he did at any time or any place. He could start masturbating. He'd also scream nasty remarks at nurses and family members and use obscene words, But then a couple seconds later, he would be a huge lovey sap and telling everybody how much he loved them and thanking them. But these were all good signs. These were signs that he was progressing and that at some point down the line that he could control what he was saying. Almost a month after his accident, he knows who he is, but he couldn't tell you where he was, why he was there, or what day or time it is. A lot of the issues with his transferring continuously was because their HMO would not pay for anything. Coming from a hospital setting, as being even a receptionist when I worked there, and growing up in the hospital environment, insurance is very difficult to work with, and I can only imagine how it was for Cathy with this. He was constantly being moved. They wouldn't pay for transportation, and this is one reason why he was too healthy for a hospital, but he wasn't able to go home. So because his injury had healed, the physical part of it had healed, he had to be moved to a rehab center. And so he was moved to McGee Rehab Facility. And as he came there, they tested him. And he was diagnosed with acute confusional state, right hemiparalysis, or paresis, and that's paralysis of the right side. Aphasia, which is a failure to locate words. Dysarthria, which is slurred speech, as I'm doing right now. Memory disturbance. Mobility deficit, which was the ability to walk. He had self-care deficits and deficits in activities of daily life. So at this point, he was not able to do very much by himself. There at McGee Rehab, Alan went through many different types of therapy. He had to do physical therapy, where they eventually taught him how to walk again. And he did occupational therapy, which he detested because they made him bake cakes and scramble eggs and do the little things that somebody would do in their everyday life. But those acts alone were promoting sequencing and organizational skills that he would need to have when he got home. And also he did cognitive and speech therapy there. Throughout this entire time at McGee, he struggled with what to do at the appropriate time. He doesn't quite have that sensor yet to that I can't swear and yell at anybody I want to. He struggled to control that. He didn't have it there to know I shouldn't be doing this. I can do whatever I want to. And as he's at McGee Rehab, Cathy is slowly more and more aware that she is going to have to be Alan's caregiver the rest of his life. But fortunately, Alan learns how to walk. He can dress himself, but he wasn't quite ready to go home, but their HMO would not pay anymore. So Alan was sent home 3 weeks after entering McGee. Now, all of this has happened in 7 weeks. Injury, hospital in Canada, hospital in Pennsylvania, and McGee Rehab Center. And now he's been sent home after a head injury. He's still not mentally ready to be home. They send him to a day hospital for therapy. And with many, it takes a few more weeks. And with many more hours of in-home therapy service that specifically helped Alan to relearn the tasks of work and how to modify his tasks at work to his situation now, he was able to go back to work part-time. And he was a vice president of loan trust officer, I believe. I can't remember how to say that specifically. But it's a very big job and a lot of responsibility. At first, when he goes back part-time, he works 4-hour days and he comes home physically exhausted. He will literally go straight up to his room and go to bed. And this is very taxing on the family too. Because he is so exhausted, he is emotionally unstable. At the point of his cognitive rehab, he emotionally is about like a toddler. He will have he'll have fits. He will throw things. He will break down and cry at the moment noticed. So Cathy pulls in on these cues and sees this, and she sees when he's so physically exhausted, she will just tell him to go to bed. And he will take a nap and he'll wake up and he'll be better. Unfortunately, the bank he worked for worked the way around the American Disabilities Act and laid him off. They fought for it for a while, but luckily he found other jobs. But at this day, right now, well, I should say at the end of the book, he could take care of his child for short periods of time. He could be left alone for short periods of time. He would work half days without any therapy services there with him. He could drive. He was able to, he got his driving license back. And he had relearned a lot of things. But he was still emotionally unstable as far as his outbursts. He still needed to take naps. He was physically exhausted at the end of the day, and that's a very big symptom of a traumatic brain injury. And in the book, this describes this as the silent illness. And as I'm reading this, I'm relating back to actually an event in my life. When I was in 4th grade, I had a classmate who was actually hit straight on in the head with a metal sled. And I look back now and I realize, he had a traumatic brain injury, and he actually had open brain surgery to relieve the pressure. And me and my friends would compare what he was like before and after, and he's a completely different person. He's rash, he's impulsive, he is very inappropriate in public, but I never put the 2 and 2 together until I read this book, realizing that was such an life-altering happening, but he has no physical symptoms of it to be able to see that he is wrong, or see that something is wrong. So, in all, a traumatic brain injury is something that you will never get over, and that it will affect family and friends that are very close to you the rest of your lives. And that Cathy probably still has a very long road ahead of her with her life with her husband, Alan. Thank you. That is my summary.